All right, I think we're ready to get started. It's 5 o'clock on the dot. I have to admit, when I first saw the time of this session, I thought, oh man, I'm the only thing keeping you from the bars and the restaurants and dinner and cocktails. And then I realized, hey, there's one more after me, so I feel sorry for that guy. Thanks for coming. I'm happy to share with you some information about the Hortonworks Big Data Maturity Scorecard. There's a nice methodology behind this, and I'll explain why we got into this and how customers use it. And more importantly, I'll explain the value that you get out of participating in this process. This is a complementary process. This is meant to be used by people who are evaluating whether they should invest in open source data management, or whether they're a customer, or whether they're thinking about their next step in their journey for leveraging use cases. So it's meant to help assess maturity and identify the goals from a maturity perspective. And I'll explain some of the drivers and the reasoning behind that as I go through this session. As I get into it, just a reminder, we are recording. These sessions will be made available to you after the event, and we are assessing. So please take the time to evaluate the session, give feedback on content, presentation, and interactions and that type of thing. So we take that and we read that and we make decisions about this for the upcoming events. So please take a look at that as well. A quick look at the agenda. We're going to spend half an hour talking through some content. I'm going to save some room for questions. And what we're going to cover is big data and retail. I represent a group of Hortonworks, a group here called Industry Solutions, and I own retail and consumer products. So I'm going to share some details from a retail perspective. But behind that, I'm going to talk about this assessment, this maturity model that we use for all industries. So even though it says big data and retail, this is big data for all industries, and some of the examples I'm going to use are retail specific. Then we're going to get into the analysis. What is the maturity analysis? How do you participate? And there will be a call to action at the end of the presentation. You can click on the link, you can go to our website, and you can participate in this maturity assessment. The benefit to you is once you do that, you see your results instantaneously, and those results are combined with other organizations in your industry, and you can compare and contrast and see how they stack up, much like what I've done here today for retail, so it'll be real for you. And then we'll talk about a few use cases. I'm going to share with you the use case maturity map that we create for each industry. And that helps identify use cases and where your entry point is. As you evaluate your journey on open source data management, where does it make sense to start? What maturity level do you need to be at to start? And then where does it make sense to go next? So we'll talk about that. And then we'll share some big data in action. These are use cases of customers of Hortonworks who have assessed their maturity, deployed a use case, and shared fiscal and financial results with us on what the impact of big data is for them using the open source data platform. So that's what we're going to spend our time talking about. Let's state the obvious, though, and talk about what's really driving organizations to look at data management. When you think about what we're looking at here, this is the fourth industrial revolution. That's a pretty dramatic way of saying this is a significant impact on organizations today. Think about the impact of industrial automation. Think about the impact of agriculture. Think about the impact of computing. And now we're seeing data really representing this fourth industrial revolution. What's interesting, though, is that companies are reacting. 40% of firms are going to introduce a new digital product portfolio in the next year and a half, and that's going to fly by. That's going to be here before we know it. 78% of Fortune 500 orgs have a medium to poor big data and analytics capability. They've self-assessed and said, we're not very good at this, we need to get better. And there's big opportunity there. And you can see the impact. 69% say improving their data strategy will be key to the relationship with the customer, which from my world in retail, no question about it. The better we can understand the propensity to buy and sentiment and intimations of customers is going to be all that more important for business planning. So some high-level quotes here you can see really driving the adoption of data and digital and really helping organizations and employees believe it's the right thing to do. In retail, we see this as well. 60% improvement potential in retail operating margins. Thinking about making that improvement in operating margins can be a significant impact. Marketing potential, making the brands and banners much more prevalent and aware. 15 to 20% improvement there. And then improving connections with consumers. It's a fact that 80% of consumers now use a device or in-store technology during shopping. How many of you have done that? been in a store, pulled out your phone, checked a price, or maybe looked at other examples. This is huge in retail. There's concepts called showrooming and web rooming, where you're shopping online, buying in store, or vice versa. And it's a major distraction from a retailer's perspective. And the fact that 8 out of 10 people have a device with them, I might argue more than that. And I might even argue some people have more than one device, and maybe they've got a couple different comparisons going on. It's a major, major impact on data management in retail. We'll talk about what retailers do about that in a few minutes. I like the economic impact of IoT in retail. By 2025, greater than $500 billion with a B. That's $500 billion of impact of IoT in retail by 2025. Data is moving at lightning pace in retail, in all industries, but in retail specifically, it's moving in lightning pace from stores to corporate and vice versa, or just in the stores themselves, or just online. IoT is the Internet of Things, and connecting all those bits and making business decisions on top of them can really make a huge impact. And the concept of beacons. Anybody not familiar with a beacon, or who's familiar with beacons? Anybody heard of beacons before? It's a fascinating technology from a retail perspective. And a lot of retailers are interested in deploying beacons, but really no one's taken the step forward and moved them into production. There's been a lot of projects where we've deployed beacons in retail, but it's a slippery slope on getting impact. However, retail companies are committed, and within the next 5 years, we see 70% of retail companies committed to using beacons to track consumer movement. I heard a great example once of beacons inside mannequins. So if you mannequin shop and say, oh, I like that, my wife would love it, I'll take it in a size X and a size Y, you can get your app out and communicate with the beacon inside the mannequin and say, tell me more about that assortment. So fascinating ways to use beacons, and we're going to see retailers use those much more prevalently. And of course, that's a bigger impact on data that wasn't there in the past. And then retail sales in the US alone. In the US alone, we're seeing retail sales in cross-channel retail by this year go to $1.8 trillion. So no question, data is a major impact in retail. So when we talk to organizations here at Hortonworks, when we go out and we work with customers who say, yeah, I heard about this Hadoop thing, tell me what it does. And we do. And we say, oh, here's what it does, here's how it works, here's why you need it, and it's all great. Well, what does that mean to me as a company, right? And whether that's retail or manufacturing or automotive, there are ways to assess the maturity. And most organizations will say, there's problems. I can't jump into that yet. I can't start a project yet because I've got challenges. And here we've broken these out. You can see there's a McKinsey quote there. Only 15%, kind of hard for me to see sideways, are able to calculate ROI from a digital initiative. Well, you know as well as I do, how are you going to sell a project if you can't calculate ROI? If the juice isn't worth the squeeze, we're not cutting the lemon open, right? It doesn't make any sense. So determining how to get value from big data is more than 50% of the challenges inhibiting organizations from launching a data project. Then 30 to 49% are finding the skills and capabilities, dealing with risk and governance, or funding for big data related initiatives. These are all constraints and bottlenecks and challenges that we need to overcome if we're going to pursue this goal of leveraging big data for our organizations. And then some other ones too, defining a strategy, locating and setting up the infrastructure and architecture, dealing with multiple integrated data sources, and of course, integrating with data technology with my existing infrastructure or architecture is a challenge. These are all challenges that organizations have to overcome. Focusing on the first one though, how to get value, what we see overall is it helps to take a baseline. Even if it's a science project, a POC or a proof of technology or a pilot, a conference room pilot, these are all ways to evaluate the impact of technology. It helps to take a baseline so you know what you're solving for, right? If we're going to solve for business impact, let's measure that impact before we start, and that's what we want to talk about here. So this is the methodology. Hortonworks put this together in the last 18 months, and it's been live now for over a year. We spent about 4 or 5 months baking it in the back room, and then we rolled it out over a year ago. The Hortonworks Big Data Maturity Scorecard helps you on your journey as you leverage technology and as you leverage open source data management tools in your organization. Reading from the bottom up, you can see we go through 4 stages. Stage 1 is awareness. Am I aware of the technology? Do I know it's there? I've heard about it, kind of know what it does, but I'm aware it's there. But I don't have much more awareness or much more knowledge than just that simple awareness. That's the base camp, if you will. And you can see our little architecture here, our diagram of climbing a mountain. We're going from base camp to base camp to base camp to the peak. We do want to achieve that fourth step, which is truly transforming the organization. But to get there, we've got to move our way logically through these segments. So awareness, you can see it there. Big data is discussed, but not really reflected in business strategies. We don't have a chief marketing officer saying, I'm going to use big data to segment my consumers, or I'm going to use big data to optimize my factory yield. What they're saying is, I'm going to optimize my factory yield. How do I do it? Well, my team's going to take care of that. Awareness is just saying, okay, we know data's out there. We're not assuming data is part of the solution. When we get into exploration, which is the second phase, you can see we're starting to see a consensus on the potential of big data. And we're seeing localized experiments and results, and we're starting to get into kind of dipping our toe in the waters. Wonderful analogy for a data lake, isn't it? We'll dip our toe into the data lake. So I like that analogy. The exploration is a wonderful way to start getting a little deeper, and then we move into optimizing. How can we leverage this technology? We've got the technology up and running. How can we truly optimize that and leverage that in the organization and get business impact? And let's measure that in 3 dimensions: customer life cycle, product life cycle, and facility life cycle. And then once we get to step 4, transforming. Data is embraced as currency. I think that's a great way to say it. Data is a currency, and it's impacting our organization in a way that revenues can, or infrastructure can, or assets can. Data is just as important. And business value streams are created through predictive analytics. So those are the 4 steps. The rest of my presentation will tie back to those 4 steps. Okay? Important slide. Make sure that you recognize that. And if you download the slides or participate, we're all going to be working against those 4 steps, from awareness to exploration to optimizing to transformation. Within those steps then, how do we assess? That's how we assess. What do we assess? There are 5 capability domains. So what are we measuring? We're measuring sponsorship. We're measuring data and analytics. We're measuring technology infrastructure. We're measuring organization and skills, and we're measuring process management. All 5 of these categories are measured in the big data scorecard, and they're measured against those 4. Are you aware, but you want to be transformative? That might be a way to answer a question in sponsorship. And as you go through that worksheet, you're leveraging these 2 methodologies with each other in conjunction so that you can achieve this matrix of output. And again, we'll see this step by step, but it's a wonderful way to start assessing the maturity of your organization. And then, like I said earlier, that's all managed and reported against by industry and part of the output. So I think that's important to focus on. So let's take a look at, with those in mind, and you can see they're listed at the bottom of this bar chart here, from sponsorship through data analytics, technology infrastructure, organizational skills, and process management. Here are the findings in retail and consumer goods. This represents companies who have gone to the Hortonworks website, identified as retail or consumer products, and filled out the scorecard. And you can see they've assessed their current capabilities, which is the green axis, and that's on an average of 1.7. And then they've assessed where they want to be in 2 to 3 years, and they've identified that to be 2.9. So you can see the takeaway there. Overall, firms are still in the exploration stage, just around that 2.0, that exploration stage. They lack an enterprise vision around big data. There's not a lot of executive sponsorship yet, and they're primarily using structured data. What we're seeing is that the whole concept of unstructured and semi-structured really isn't a burning platform for them yet. Or if it is, it may not be at that optimization or transformation level. We're starting to adopt analytical tools for project-specific objectives. But really that exploration stage is the self-assessment for these retailers and consumer products companies that participated. In the next 2 to 3 years, they're looking to be in the optimizing phase, which is that 2.3. So they're not setting the bar as high as that step 4, which is transformational, but they're looking to be in optimizing phase. They want enterprise-wide vision, an alignment with sponsorship and funding, and they want to have a data lake with unstructured data, integrated analytical tools to really build a cohesive view around all those different parts of data. And they'll leverage a mix of in-house and outsourced resources. This all comes from that framework of the questions. So this represents the population of participants who filled out the scorecard. Let's break this down by category now. We're going to go through each of those, the sponsorship and then each of the other 4 categories, and analyze that. So the first one is sponsorship, and here you can see the actual results. Again, the numbers 1 through 4 represent the stages of the maturity. And then the questions relate to sponsorship, which include vision and strategy, funding, advocacy, and business case. So in vision and strategy, you can see it's front-loaded. Most of the firms are in early stages of establishing a vision, and in 2 or 3 years, most will have them. So it's a logical way to see that, yes, sponsorship and vision and strategy is important. As we evolve and become more mature, that'll become more prevalent. Funding, primarily driven by IT at this stage. Now, I should mention this was collected at least 6 months ago, so we're looking at data that was collected and tabulated probably in the April and May timeframe. So that was established over the last year. One of the things that's exciting about open source, and you've seen this since you're leveraging the platform, one of the things that's exciting is the growth path and the evolution of the technology. So primarily driven by IT is starting to change. And you can see here, we see big data programs will be part of a cyclical budgeting process in the near future, and those look to be balanced between 3 and 4, between optimizing and transforming. Advocacy, there is a little bit of executive sponsorship, but that will continue to increase with better alignment among leadership. And then business case. Most of the firms, although they don't have a business case right now, they plan to have one in the next 2 to 3 years. Does that resonate with anybody? How many had a business case as you started your project? Yeah, so good, and it makes sense. Again, when you have the business case, what you're measuring, you're analyzing, and you're establishing a basemark. So that truly is a best practice. Some of the people that filled out this spreadsheet or this scorecard didn't have that. So that's a growing trend. If we look at data and analytics processes, you can see data collection, primarily mostly structured data. They expect to make big strides and will deploy automated data to collect structured and unstructured in the next 2 to 3 years. So you can see the green is heavily weighted towards the left, and it's balanced out towards the right as we get closer to unstructured and data collection. And then data storage, most are still discarding the majority of the data, but planning to keep data lake to keep all their data. So it's an opportunity to improve that, and quite frankly, that may be the reason that firms are jumping into the big data platform, to be able to store all that data, not having to archive and discard and get rid of it. And then data processing. Most processing is manual, but we expect to have enterprise metadata and standards in the near future. And then data analysis, mainly on business metrics reporting, is going to change and become much more advanced and predictive. I see this in the customers I talk to as well. Predictive is the holy grail, being able to become much more predictive and proactive in dealing with consumer response requirements and responses to what they need. And then in the technology and infrastructure, you can see hosting strategy. Most, and again, this is as of the April-May timeframe, most were on-premise. And they're planning to deploy a hybrid model. I see this with all the customers I talk to. Some of our more mature customers that have been running the tech for a few years now were on-premise, because that's where they started. You think back to the Hadoop 1.0 days, on-prem was the way that most people rolled it out. And now we're seeing customers sign up and go straight to the cloud. Although I will share with you that most of the new customers have a hybrid model, especially in retail. We see store operations, loyalty, and back office functionality on-prem, but then a lot of digital things online and in the cloud to take advantage of the digital environment that's hosted. So hosting strategy makes a logical sense to move towards hybrid. Functionality, moving towards complementing an EDW data warehouse. One of the things that's interesting is that when we started the company back in 2011, we knew that Hortonworks had to be a +1 technology. We knew nobody was going to start with a greenfield or a blue sky, right? No one's starting from scratch and saying, I need to go out and buy some open source data management support so I can start from scratch. Everyone had something already. So very important to us, and you see this with all the partners that are here today, was to have a very strong partner ecosystem. So we knew that we had to work very well with all the analytics tools, had to work very well with the enterprise data warehouse vendors, the ERP systems. All those sources of data had to work very well with this open source data management. So we're seeing that EDW data warehouses do work very well with the data lake, and data lake can connect to all those analytics tools to add capabilities and add business impact to those traditional reports. And that supports this functionality, where people are certainly starting with EDW but planning to move into business impact with their use cases. And then tools, analytical tools for project-specific objectives, and they'll eventually have central administration, and then integration. Currently, there's very little integration within the tools, but there will be better integration in the future. And that's customer plans based on how they plan to deploy that. And then organization and skills. Big data skills are mostly located within the IT organization currently for these firms. However, they're investing a lot to gain advanced skills, either through education programs or through community environments or through sessions like this, to gain advanced analytical skills across the organization. And then most work is being outsourced, but they plan to deploy a mix of in-house and outsourced skill sets in the near future. Leadership. This is an interesting opportunity to talk about a center of excellence. We see most firms starting with a centralized analytics group, and we see a lot of adoption of that going forward, really moving into a center of excellence to manage data and dedicating a chief data officer to really help captain that and move that through the organization. And then cross-functional practices. We're seeing increasing capability for cross-functional collaboration and analysis as well. So I've taken you through each of the details in the capability domains, and the last one here is process management. You can see this is the level of detail you get when you fill out the scorecard. You provide impact from your organization, and that's tallied, much like this, against those in your industry. So let's take a quick run through of this last category. Planning and budgeting. Firms shared that there was little formal planning and budgeting for big data programs. However, they expect to have that in a few years. And then operations, security, and governance varied. It really varied in this area. Majority, we're going to have an enterprise-wide policy in the near future. And then program management, majority of the firms expect to monitor the outcomes along with formal planning. And then investment focus. I thought this was interesting. Currently made on an ad hoc basis. I've seen this when the customers I talk to share their strategy, starting as maybe a project that they just wanted to kind of test it. They quickly moved into this data lake becoming a strategic part of their landscape, and that's reflected here as well. Investment focus becomes a strategic spend. So I've taken you through those steps. This is an example of one retailer in the UK. This is a pretty well-known general merchandise and grocer in the UK, and you can see how they tabulated this. They gave themselves a 2.5 on average, which is in the optimizing stage, and they expect to be nearly in transforming with that 3.9 tally. So they're hedging their bets a little bit on a few of those questions to drop that average down below 4.0. But you can see how they've got an enterprise-wide vision on strategy, and they've started to ingest unstructured data, and they rarely discard data, and they've adopted Hadoop to accomplish workloads, and they're investing in big data skills. And they've already included big data programs in budgeting and planning. So really, when you think about it, they're identifying leadership, they're tasking their teams, and they're driving adoption across these areas. So great opportunity to take a look at one organization's entry of data and how they assess themselves and where they plan to go. And again, you can see the methodology that's in place here to manage this. That is the system. And what I'd like to do now is take you through what we work with customers on as we evaluate that. This is what we call a use case maturity roadmap. And what we've done is we've selected a number of use cases. You can see them listed on the right-hand side. These are use cases that we see retailers deploying in their open source data journey. Now, they may start with one and go to the next and go to another. The point I'm going to make is that it doesn't matter where they start. This tool helps this organization figure out what they need to start where they want to start. So let me explain the graph. The X and Y axis are the same. You can see those phases that we just discussed. They go through awareness and then into exploration, then into optimization, then into transformation. And then I've got it segmented by retail line of business, from marketing, digital store operations, merchandising, IT operations, and then purchasing and logistics. And these use cases are categorized across the X and Y axis by business, and then color-coded based on, are they competitive or not? Is this really a competitive differentiator for a retailer? Well, you can see the black isn't. So something like a clickstream analysis, everyone does clickstream analysis on their digital properties. It's not doing that or not doing that is not going to differentiate a retailer from their competitors. Doing it with big data can make it more effective, and it can become a competitive differentiator. But that use case out of the box really isn't going to be impactful from a differentiation phase. Thinking about some of the new innovations, however, can. And if you think about let's see, 17, machine learning and artificial intelligence. That truly can be a differentiator. And building a machine learning algorithm to sense where consumers are planning to spend and what the experiences they're looking for are, and how we can really meet those needs to drive a purchasing experience that millennials will take part in. That can be delivered by machine learning and AI based on all the data that we can collect and they can share with us. And that truly is a new innovation that's transformative. And you can see then why it's tagged orange, it's in IT ops, and it's in the transformation stripe. So all of these use cases represent conversations I have with our retail customers and retail prospects as they consider ways to get started. And I'll share a quick journey with you. I've got one retailer who started with clickstream analysis, which was 5, down there in the lower, should be there, I can't quite see in the sideways. I think it's there in the awareness. Cool, all right, thank you. And then they moved to single view of the customer, which was out in the transformative. From there, they moved to price optimization. And then, from there they went to recommendation engine, and then they went to price optimization. And their last use case was calculating cost of goods sold for an acquisition they made, which turned their Hadoop cluster from a system of insight into a system of record. So that was a journey they took, moving their way from one step to the next. And you can see they quickly moved their way up that maturity curve by leveraging those different use cases. The clickstream analysis helped them identify if someone was hitting their website from a competitor or leaving their website to go to a competitor, if there was a page broken, standard server logs that were interesting, but it was a nice use case that generated value. The single view of the customer, which was the second use case, was very impactful because they were able to see what's the true profile of my consumer, what's their online profile, including social media, sentiment, likes and dislikes from a Facebook link, and then what's their digital history from transactions, and then what's their in-store history, and how can we combine that with value-added services that they come into the store to take advantage of. That really gave them marketing gold to be able to make promotions and recommendations to get closer to that consumer, which was their next one, recommendation engine, which was number 6. And they leveraged that single view of the customer data to make recommendations, targeted promotions, and get a lot closer to that consumer. And then price optimization was where they turned 180 degrees, stopped looking at the consumer, and started looking at the price. They had a commitment for their brand and their banner to have everyday low price in certain areas, and they were able to determine that they were meeting that obligation, that commitment to keep the price low, or they needed to drop price for it. So very powerful set of use cases for them, and they worked their way through this use case maturity roadmap. So with that in mind then, let's think about one of those examples I just spoke of. The single view of the customer is a pretty powerful use case. It's a really great opportunity to provide SKU level data, basket data, combine that with unstructured and social media to get a true profile of the consumer. I see this with any retailer that has a loyalty program, and I also see this in discount retailers who may not have a relationship with a consumer, but they have a profile that they want to target and market to. So great opportunities to leverage that. You can see the business value. Identifying a number of unique customers can really drive our ROI and bottom line optimization and improves loyalty. Real-time targeted pricing can help with better margins, et cetera, and it really can have a huge impact. So single view of the customer is a conversation we have quite often with retailers, and this is a nice snapshot of the impacts there. So with that in mind, I want to share another use case with you. This is a customer of ours in the South. They do appliance sales, and they also do financing. So it was a big step for them to identify their consumer, but also identify what the impact is of marketing to those consumers. So they wanted to improve their direct marketing spend, and they weren't able to really see from a customer's credit and financial situation. They wanted to make sure they were marketing to the right customers, the right targeted profile for their customers that they wanted to pursue. And they really had a mismatch between the ad planner and warehouse inventory that caused them to lose sales. And the generation of various business reports took days to complete. And then even after all those days waiting for those reports, not all the information was available. So it was a challenge for them. What they shared with us was that by putting an open source data management system into play, they were able to have significant business impact to the tune of $3 million in the first 10 months of 2016. And they expect $4.5 to $5 million in run rate savings. That's a savings on the direct market direct mailing spend. So huge impact. That's real money. It really helped justify the use case and the project that they were working on. And the other one, they saw the 300x improvement in turnaround on the product performance report, and then reduced associate time in coding for red flags and lookups for decline rules. That was a 500x reduction. So the chief marketing officer and the chief information officer were both involved in this project, and they were really excited about the output here. They continue to be a great customer, very high on that maturity curve, and are factoring in metrics like this as they evaluate business cases and use cases and continue down their journey on that maturity curve. So those are the examples I've taken you through in depth and detail for how the scorecard works and how the methodology works. The call to action is to go to the website, take the survey. You can click on the link. It's on the top right-hand corner in the header of the Hortonworks website, and you can access the Big Data Scorecard. You do have to provide your contact information. You log in, and then you can go through that spreadsheet, and then what will happen is you'll get an output. You'll get your results. Those will be tallied alongside the industry results where you self-identify yourself, and then if you have a sales rep or if you have a contact with Hortonworks, we can work through that with you if there's an opportunity to have a conversation. But it's a great tool to help identify maturity and opportunities. And that's all I have. So we've got time for questions. Yes?
So you presented the retail, survey retail, I assume you surveyed other industries also?
Yes, yes.
So retailers are notoriously, tighter IT budgets than, of course, the social media companies.
Yep. Yep.
Sitting on a lot of money. I was just wondering if that was at all, that's an anecdotal thing, but trying to sell retailer stuff, you see that
Yeah.
across your other peers
Yeah.
selling banker stuff.
Yeah.
I was wondering if that was reflected in the results. I couldn't quite go through
All the results I shared with you were retail specific.
Yeah, no,
But that level of result is available, and we can talk a little bit in more detail about what industries are higher and more mature in certain areas.
I was just wondering if you've seen that reflected about, because any technology transformation, whether it's open source or not,
Yeah.
is going to cost money and skills. I was
Yeah.
just wondering if that fared out your results when you surveyed, say, the retailers versus, again, I'm staying away from social media, purely technology.
Yeah, sure.
Just curious.
Well, if we look, I can share some major dynamics with you. I've been with the company now about 3 years, and I came from a large enterprise software company where this was a big part of what services they provide to their customers as well. What I've seen here at Hortonworks is that retail, although they do buy differently, it's a very frugal industry, and spend is closely monitored, was our number 2 industry. Telco was number 1. Telco was number 1 from an industry perspective. Retail was number 2. I think it's because of the impact. You think about open source data management, it can have incredible impact, and it can really drive a lot of success. And then close behind that were manufacturing, insurance. Automotive is on a tear right now. Automotive is taking off with all the connected car and data driven by autonomous vehicles. Healthcare is big. We're seeing genomics projects come with incredible data opportunities, so healthcare is in there. And then financial services, which ironically are all the industries that we've chose to support with general managers like myself. So we see those, and I respect your question, which was, is retail a laggard or a leader when we start looking at this, or is the impact different? I'd classify it as number 2 from an organizational perspective. It's pretty significant. Yeah. Yes, question?
I have a couple of assessment execution questions.
Uh-huh.
How long does it normally take you to do the assessment? How many people and what kind of roles? And how deeply do you get? Do you get down to the business case level for key initiatives and the roadmap?
Great question. The question is, how long does it take to take the assessment, and what types of people take it, and do you get down to the business case? We stop short of the business case. You get all the content that I shared with you here today. That's a comprehensive output of one completion of the data. It takes about 25 minutes or so. We're looking for someone to take it at a mid-level. We're not looking for executive business level participation, but yet we don't want a practitioner filling it out. We're looking for someone with as much business awareness as much business awareness as possible. And what we really see is the concept of a business analyst in data warehousing or business process, taking it out and providing access to that data.
Sorry, but to get to the whole roadmap, like the entire,
Mhm.
it's not 25 minutes, like how long does it take to get to the implementation roadmap, which is prioritize, sequence, et cetera?
Oh, you mean the implementation of the use case?
Roadmap,
Ah,
get to that.
okay. Yeah, it takes less than a week. You can get the output. It's tabulated and it's sent out through an email. But yeah, it's available pretty quickly. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, great. Yeah, I know that I was going to be co-presenting this today with a colleague of mine, Abbas Ricky, who is based in London. He was planning to be here. He's fine with all the things that have been going on in London, but he wasn't able to make the trip. So we work very closely with him on this project, and my team of the industry general managers are very closely aligned with this project, and we're very proud of it. It's a great opportunity for customers to really come in, assess the maturity, identify a roadmap, and then start building against that going forward. So please visit the assessment. You can go in and evaluate these sessions. This will be available, the slides will be available, and the recording will be available online after this event. And I wish you a great rest of the show and a great night. Thank you very much.